I want to bring you some breaking news now, and that is that talks between the U.S. and Iran taking place right now in Switzerland have concluded. Let's go straight to Osama bin Javed, who is in Bürgenstock. Osama, what do we know at this point?
Well, I've just spoken to a few delegates who've told me that the talks for today have concluded, and all the teams are still here, and they're working on a joint communique for this meeting. It has been an extraordinary day, a historic day, as was opened by the U.S. Vice President JD Vance as he went into the first round. We were in the room. We saw the commotion when the Iranian foreign minister came in and then told the Pakistani prime minister that he was not going to be coming in front of all the cameras. So the Iranian delegation stayed outside, then they went in when the cameras had left, and that was the first round where those statements were made by all sides. And then came the tweet by President Donald Trump about the threat that this team perceived against them, that they will not be able to go back to their country. So since then, there's been back and forth between all sides on what are the major issues, how can they be brought closer. The Qataris and the Pakistanis have been holding bilateral, trilateral meetings, and at one point, I've been told there was a quadrilateral session as well, albeit very brief. So it appears that for tonight, the talks have concluded. All teams remain in the room. At any point, I've been told that we're going to be given a joint communique. We expect that the departures that were set for tomorrow are going to be the same from some of the delegations, but there has been no breakdown, as one delegate told us, as was being reported by various sides earlier on during the day.
So, I just want to clarify what you're saying here, because you mentioned the threats coming from President Trump toward Iran. Obviously, the Iranians did not take this kindly. I mean, how should we be characterizing this? Is this that talks are breaking down because of that, or things are kind of coming to their natural end? And are there going to be teams staying behind? Because JD Vance said earlier today in setting this up, he said that, look, the political people are just here to kind of push this along, get it started, but it's really the technical teams who are empowered to hash through some of these details. Are they going to be staying behind?
Well, as far as we understand from the Qatari government, we've been told that groups have been formed and they are going to begin those communications with each other on various points of the memorandum of understanding. Remember, the 14 points, the first one of those 14 points became the point of contention. The first point in the memorandum of understanding, according to the Iranians, was that all sides respect each other and the guns should fall silent, and there should be respect for sovereignty over Lebanon as well. And they point out that the Israelis have continued to attack Lebanon, and that is against the spirit and the letter of the memorandum of understanding. And that is why this went on for quite a while. Yes, the tweet played its part, but that was not the only reason. This is a sea of differences, as one diplomat put it, that the Pakistanis and the Qataris are trying to build bridges over. We've been hearing from some delegates in both camps, and they've been telling us that this has been one roller coaster of a ride, where at one point they reached a really low point during the day, and then they were back on. And somebody pointed to me that I saw the Pakistani team led by the Pakistani Chief of Defense Forces shuttling between various camps while I was there in that lobby. And I can tell you that those people who were with me, they were like, look at the body language. This looks, as he's moving towards them, it looks positive. As he's coming down, it still looks positive. Again, these are interpretations, because we really don't know what happened behind closed doors. There were some indications by semi-official news agencies in Tehran that the trucks have broken down and the Iranians have left, which was completely untrue. As I was speaking to diplomats about this, and they told me that there are various aspects in Tehran, in Washington, D.C., who do not want these talks to succeed, who want the fighting to continue so that they can pursue their agendas. And what the point of the Qataris here is that they're here to make sure that these don't break apart, because the region Iran itself cannot withstand more fighting, more economic turmoil, more death and destruction. And that is the reason why JD Vance said that this is a historic day. And remember, it is historic because it's only the second time since the 1979 revolution that the Iranian and the American leaders have sat down face to face with each other. So just them being in the room is being seen as a positive development. The talks not breaking down completely is being seen as positive, but we still have to wait and see what was agreed upon, how much of those agendas. As we were told, this was a very formulaic meeting where there were going to be 3 sessions, one on Lebanon, one on the Strait of Hormuz, and one on the nuclear issue and sanctions. From the Iranian side, we've heard that there was some discussion on the sanctions relief and Iranian oil exports, but it is all different sources who are telling us these things. We were relaying them to you, but we don't know exactly what the cumulative outcome of this was and what are the words that are going to be decided as all sides are poring over this communique.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong here, Osama. So technical teams possibly staying, talks ending where you are in Switzerland, but still going on in some form or fashion behind the scenes. Is there any chance that they could restart in the morning before people are scheduled to go? And I just wonder, I mean, there were so many positive signs here. The Americans were, aside from the threatening language used by the president, the Americans had seemed quite conciliatory over the last couple of days. You have also had the ceasefire seeming to hold for the last 24 hours or so. And I just wonder what more could have happened. What more did the Iranians need to see in order for them to think that sticking around in Switzerland would have been worth it?
Well, the word from the Iranian spokesperson for these negotiations was that they want to see commitment for commitment. They don't want to see just a signing for the sake of it, where everybody feels that they've ended the war and moves on, because according to Iran, there's a lot that needs to be discussed. And if the commitment is that you sign it and you say that there is going to be respect for sovereignty, and there's complete disregard for Lebanese sovereignty, well, things can't move forward. I was speaking to some experts earlier in the day, and they were telling me that, well, for the guns to fall silent, Iran will have to control Hezbollah, and the Israelis will have to be reined in by the Americans. And the point of view of Iran was that until Israel's occupying Lebanese territory in contravention of international law, as long as Israel is destroying village after village, killing people in Lebanon. You've seen the numbers go into their thousands now. The Lebanese resistance, according to the Iranians, the Hezbollah have the right to respond to Israel. And that is why it was always from the onset going to be extremely difficult to bridge that gap. And especially when the Iranians say that they have zero trust in the process or the other side. They're only here because the mediators have assured them that this is going to be a serious process. And the Iranians point to the fact that they sat in Geneva in February in good faith with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. And as the talks were progressing, the Americans and the Israelis decided to attack them. They point towards Oman, where in 2025, they sat down with the Omanis. It was an indirect format. And while they were in negotiation, the Americans and the Israelis decided to attack them. And this is why the Iranians say that there is zero trust. And that is why the Americans also say that Iran was given a deal by the previous administration. That was a bad deal, according to this president, a deal which allowed Iran to go closer to a nuclear weapon, a claim that is denied by Iran. And that is why this trust deficit is just huge. And the interlocutors have told us time and again that they have had a very difficult job to bring them to the table. Also, what we were discussing earlier in the day with some sources who were briefed on these talks, that the biggest impediment to peace in the region remains the state of Israel, because Israel has tried multiple times to derail these talks. And they pointed towards the attempts in the early days of the war in February and March, where the Pakistanis and the Qataris prevented Arab Gulf states from retaliating militarily to Iran, which would have engulfed the entire region in tit-for-tat war. And then they pointed towards more recent attacks by Israel on the Lebanese capital, Beirut, which was a red line that was stated during the ceasefire, and Israel crossed it, and it was the interlocutors, it was the state of Qatar and Pakistan which prevented the Iranians from retaliating. And again, on Wednesday, when this deal was being signed, Israel again attacked relentlessly Lebanese suburbs. So this is why all encompassing, there are positive signs according to the interlocutors. There's developments that have taken place in Switzerland. We're just waiting to see the actual language that comes out of the conclusion of this meeting, so we realize what was actually achieved and where do these talks go from here.
All right, Osama, I'm going to let you get back on the phone, try to get more information, work the sources that are there on the ground in Switzerland, but please don't go far. As soon as you get something, please come back to us. In the meantime, let's go over to Al Jazeera's Al-Miqdad Al-Ruhayd, who's standing by live from Tehran. So, Al-Miqdad, you were just listening to what our colleague Osama bin Javed was reporting there from Switzerland. I wonder, what are the Iranians saying at this point about their decision to pack up and go home tomorrow?
Well, actually, Tom, what we can say here from the Iranian capital, Tehran, is that these talks seem to have succeeded in keeping the diplomatic track open. We have seen in the past few hours that there's many media, especially from here, saying that there's the collapse in talks, but at the same time, they are sending many signals that the Iranian delegation have walked away from the venue. At the same time, we have seen this report from our colleague Osama bin Javed, who is in the venue inside that room. So right now, from what we can understand, that Iranian delegation will definitely travel there to follow up, to force American to implement or to force them about the memorandum of understanding. Many of the clauses within the memorandum of understanding is being one of the most demands right now for Iranian to move forward. And we can just remind our viewers by the first one is about the situation in Lebanon. We have seen in the past couple of hours actually many messages coming out of Tehran regarding the situation of Lebanon, especially from Tasnim news agency, which is a semi-official, regarding the situation there and also the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and about the lifting the naval blockade. So these are like 4 clauses within the memorandum of understanding, Iranian officials demanding to be implemented on the ground to after that moving forward.
So, Al-Miqdad, Osama mentioned a moment ago that, look, the Iranians obviously needed to rein in Hezbollah. The Americans obviously needed to rein in the Israelis. But for the last day or so, we have seen relative quiet in Lebanon. And I just wonder if we can conclude here that that a ceasefire in Lebanon was not good enough for the Iranians, that they wanted to see signs that the Israelis were actually going to withdraw. And they didn't see that because the Israelis have made abundantly clear through the Defense Minister Israel Katz, who said, look, they're not going to withdraw from what they call their security zone. So is that the issue that ultimately the Iranians had with these talks moving forward?
Well, actually, from what we can understand, from what we learned, and also from what just our colleague Osama bin Javed said, that the state of Israel is being like not happy with this. They are not implemented on the memorandum of understanding. So it could be a huge setback for Iranian to move forward, Scott. And we can have a taste from the Iranian media here, speaking about the situation in southern Lebanon, speaking clearly about the situation there. For example, the Tasnim news agency and Iranian parliament, also Iranian parliament speaker, sent a very harsh language regarding to latest comment from the Donald Trump. So this is the language coming out of Tehran. And from the semi-official media regarding the situation in Lebanon, they are saying clearly that the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon is being one of the main demand for them to move forward with the negotiation. But at the same time, we have seen there is no clause of the diplomatic track. They travel to the Switzerland to move forward with the negotiation. But at the same time, it could be a huge setback for them to move forward with the other clauses within the memorandum of understanding.
All right, that's Al Jazeera's Al-Miqdad Al-Ruhayd reporting live for us from Tehran. Al-Miqdad, please keep us posted if you get more intel from where you are. In the meantime, let's bring in General Mark Kimmett from Washington, D.C. as a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. General Kimmett, welcome back. You've just been listening to my colleagues there try to explain what exactly the problem is here in Switzerland. I wonder what your diagnosis is. What do you think has gone wrong here?
I think what's gone wrong is, unfortunately, the rhetoric being used by President Trump. He just got off Fox News where he made some direct threats against the Iranians if they don't open up the Strait of Hormuz. He has not, in their view, put enough pressure on Israel. And third, the issue of a non-threat agreement inside the MOU. I'm glad to see that the diplomatic track is still open. I still am concerned that the diplomatic track is being done in public. I have found over my years in the State Department that the best negotiations are done in private and not doing, as the Iranians say, a media show. But look, the fact remains is this issue is too important to the United States and to Iran to accept this as simply a walk away and we're not going to talk away. We need to get back to the talks as soon as possible.
General Kim, it's possible that the technical teams for each side could be sticking around to try to hash out some of these details. The Vice President JD Vance said earlier that, look, these teams they have their boss's phone numbers. They're empowered to try to move things along and to do what they can there. I just wonder how much these technical teams can actually move things forward without having these political their political bosses there to sort of oversee things.
Well, I think a lot, and we will not get a lot of news coming from the technical teams, I would suspect, which is exactly what we want. The most important issue on the technical teams will have to do with the discussions on the nuclear threshold inside of Iran. For example, what's going to happen to, quote, the nuclear dust? What level of enrichment, if any, will the United States agree to? How much of the infrastructure of the Iranian nuclear program will be allowed to stay? And what type of inspection and verification regime will be established? Those are very technical issues that technical teams need to talk about. That is not something that can be done in front of a camera. That is not something that we would expect senior leaders in Iran and senior leaders inside of America to even have an idea of what I just meant with what those 4 points I just said. The technical experts are the right ones to do this, and I'm glad to see this is being done in private.
Do you think that there's a more fundamental problem here, General Kimmett, and that is that the Iranians, it seems, are not just satisfied with the kind of ceasefire that we have seen in Lebanon over the past day or so, but they believe that the memorandum of understanding involves Israeli troops actually withdrawing, because point 1 of it says that both sides will ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. Presumably that means that Israeli troops should not be on Lebanese territory. I mean, is that your interpretation as well of this?
Yeah, but we've got to understand that the Iranians are asking the Americans to violate the sovereignty of the nation of Israel and tell them what they should believe is in their national interest. Again, as I said in the earlier segment, I think it was a mistake for both sides to couple the issue of Israel-Lebanon into this discussion. Neither are signatories between Hezbollah and Israel. There have been no public statements from leaders like Naim Qassem inside of Hezbollah that they accept the conditions of the ceasefire. In fact, he has explicitly refused to associate himself with a ceasefire deal. So why Iran offered and the United States accepted the coupling of Iran and Israel to what is a deal between the Iranians and America, I think is making it unnecessarily complicated and significantly reduces the probability of success in those talks.
General, I certainly understand your point that Israel is going to do what Israel thinks is in its own best interest. But President Trump has also made clear, and the Vice President, I think, made even more clear when he said that, look, there is only one country on planet Earth right now that still has sympathy for the nation of Israel, and that's the United States of America. So don't you think that it's also in Israel's best interest to kind of take the advice from the Americans?
Well, I agree, but I'd also say there's only one country on earth that is sympathetic to the Hezbollah cause, and that's the nation of Iran. So, look, I am not promoting the nation of Israel. I am promoting a ceasefire between two belligerents that have had unnecessary external influences trying to make demands that the external influences are unable to uphold.
General Kimmett, I also want to ask you about the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians have said it's closed, but in practice, it seems like there are ships getting through, hugging the coastline closer to Oman. Surely the Iranians could close the strait if they wanted. Surely they could start firing at ships in the Strait of Hormuz if they wanted to. Why do you think it is that they haven't taken that step?
Well, because very simply, if you take a look at the blockade that is still there, they certainly know that if the Iranians attempt to stop that free flow, the United States will reciprocate. They will reinforce the blockade and we'll be back to where we were 2 weeks ago.
All right, that is General Mark Kimmett, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. We'll leave it there. We appreciate your analysis as always. So just to recap here, what we're talking about